The rain fell sideways over London, spring of 1943. The air raid sirens had stopped hours ago, but the city still trembled with the memory of them. Streets smelled of wet brick and coal. In a converted hospital near Whitechapel, nurse Clara Jennings dipped her pen into an inkwell and began another letter she had no business writing. Lieber Eric, it feels wrong to start a letter this way, and worse to use your language. But if I write in German, it's harder for anyone here to read it. She hesitated. Outside the ward door, someone laughed, a rough, tired sound. She bent closer to the paper. You shouldn't be in my thoughts at all. You were the enemy for exactly 4 minutes before you became the man bleeding in front of me. I was supposed to save your life, not learn the color of your eyes. She stopped, listening for footsteps. None. Only the steady ticking of the ward clock and the soft moan of the wind. She had met Eric Weiss the previous winter, when the Royal Air Force brought in the survivors of a German bomber that had been shot down over the coast of Kent. 2 men were already dead. The third, barely conscious, had a piece of shrapnel lodged near his spine. His uniform still smelled of smoke and fuel. Clara had been on duty 40 hours straight. The ward doctor ordered her to stabilize the prisoner until the military intelligence officers arrived. Don't speak to him, he warned. And if you do, make sure he doesn't speak back. She nodded. But when the man stirred and muttered something, Wasser, bitte. She poured water into his cracked lips without thinking. His eyes opened, gray-blue and young. Danke, he whispered. And that, she realized later, was the beginning. One word, spoken across a war. Weeks passed. The hospital overflowed with Allied casualties from North Africa. Clara's days blurred into blood, iodine, and morphine. She forgot meals, forgot to sleep. But each evening, after rounds, she found herself lingering by the far bed behind the privacy curtain, the one assigned to prisoner number 4127. He called her Fräulein Krankenschwester, Miss Nurse, and smiled through the pain. She pretended not to understand, though she did. Her father had been a language teacher before the Blitz. She had learned German as a girl. Don't, she whispered one night when he thanked her. If anyone hears you, they'll think I'm praying, he said in broken English. She should have reported him. She didn't. When his wounds healed enough for him to stand, the guards moved him to a military prison on the outskirts of the city. Before he left, he pressed something into her hand, a thin silver chain. For your kindness, he said. She tried to return it. I can't keep this. Then throw it away, he said softly. But don't forget I gave it to you. 3 weeks later, she received a letter in the post with no return address. The handwriting was careful, foreign. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the words written in both English and German, as though he was learning as he wrote, Dear Clara, the doctor said I will be sent to a camp in Wales. I am told we will plant trees. Strange punishment, to make things grow after so much burning. I think of the sound of your voice when you said, don't. I hope someday I can hear you say, do. She should have burned it. Instead, she folded it into her diary. She wrote back 2 days later, using her cousin's address in Sussex. Dear Eric, I'm not sure why I'm answering. Perhaps because the world is full of orders, and this feels like disobedience that doesn't hurt anyone. I'm glad you're alive. Please don't write again. He did, of course. The exchange became a rhythm, fragile and secret. His letters came on rough camp stationery, hers on hospital forms cut in half. She wrote about the patients, about the smell of roses in the hospital garden when the bombs stopped falling long enough for them to bloom. He wrote about the trees he planted, the way the guards argued about football, the ache in his shoulder when it rained. By the summer of 1943, her drawer held 6 of his letters. The 7th arrived hidden inside an envelope from the Red Cross, addressed to Miss Clara Jennings, civilian nurse. Clara, the guards say Germany is losing. They say our cities burn the way yours did. I wonder if anyone will be left to plant trees when it's done. When I think of England now, I see only the light in that ward and the smell of soap on your hands. She read it until the words blurred. Her roommate, Nurse Edith Blake, noticed her distractedness. You're somewhere else lately, she said. Got a secret admirer? Clara forced a laugh. If I did, He'd have terrible handwriting. Then he's a man, Edith replied. That night Clara dreamed of the sea, of letters floating across it like paper boats. All by autumn, rumors spread that the Germans were preparing a counteroffensive. The hospital filled again. One morning, Clara arrived to find a plainclothes officer waiting by her desk. He asked if she spoke German. She lied and said no. He smiled thinly. "We've intercepted correspondence from a POW camp," he said. "Someone there has been writing to a London nurse. Treason, if proven. Do you know anything about it?" Her heartbeat was so loud she was sure he could hear it. "No," she said. He studied her face, nodded once, and left. She went straight to her room, took Eric's letters, and tied them with the silver chain. For a moment she almost threw them into the fire. Then she stopped. "If I burn them," she thought, "I burn the only part of me that still feels alive." She hid them instead, behind a loose floorboard under her bed. Outside, the war thundered on. Inside, she waited for another letter that might never come. When it finally did, months later, it was only a few lines written in a shaky hand. "Clara, we are being moved east. They say the new camp is colder. If I never write again, remember this. The foolish kindness of one enemy saved a man who did not deserve it. I will find you when the world is sane again." She pressed the paper to her lips. She didn't know then that it would be the last letter she would ever receive from Eric Weiss. The rain turned to fog as autumn sank into London. The wards smelled of antiseptic and fear, of metal and damp linen. Clara barely slept. She worked double shifts to keep her thoughts from circling back to the name that now lived under her floorboards. Eric Weiss. Every time she passed the railway station, she caught herself scanning the crowd for faces that did not belong there. Tall, fair, German faces she should have feared. She hated herself for it. The war was changing shape. The Allies had landed in Italy. German bombers still came at night, but the sirens had lost their terror. Londoners merely sighed and went underground like moles. Life went on, stubborn as weeds through pavement. For Clara, life had shrunk to the space between letters. The quiet hours after midnight when she could unfold his words and touch the paper he had touched. "Clara, it is strange to think that paper can cross a world where people cannot. When I write, I imagine you reading, the candlelight on your face. The guards laugh at me. They say I am writing to a ghost. Maybe I am." She read that letter until she knew every smudge. Then she rewrote her reply 3 times before posting it. "Eric, maybe ghosts are the only ones who understand us now. Be careful. Don't write too often. They are watching everyone." She sealed it and walked 3 blocks in the blackout, her coat pulled tight. At the postbox she hesitated, her hand trembling above the slot. Then she let it drop and walked away quickly, heart hammering like the distant guns. The following week she was transferred to a field hospital in Normandy, barely a month after the Allied landings. She never asked for the posting. Perhaps someone had noticed her nerves, her distractedness. The crossing was rough. The ship's hold was full of stretchers, men already gray from shock. France was a ruin. The air smelled of smoke and crushed earth. She was assigned to the triage tents outside Caen, patching wounds from dawn till collapse. The only letters she received now were official bulletins. Eric's handwriting vanished from her life like a dream at daylight. One evening, as she sorted supplies, she found a tin envelope among the bandages. No name, no address, only a folded paper inside. Her stomach turned as she unfolded it. It was in German, but the script was unmistakable. "Clara, if you are reading this, then my words have traveled farther than I could. We were moved again, east of Dresden. I do not know what we are building here. It is not peace. Some men do not come back from the work site. Still, I keep the chain you gave back to me. They think it's a charm. They are right. Every morning I whisper your name, even though I can't say it aloud. I am not afraid of dying, only of being forgotten." The paper shook in her hands. She had no idea how it had reached her. Perhaps a Red Cross courier, perhaps a miracle. She hid it inside the lining of her uniform. That night, she walked outside the tent. The moon hung low over the fields. For the first time in months, she whispered his name into the wind. "Eric!" It sounded foreign and holy all at once. In September, the hospital received an unusual visitor, a major from Army intelligence, tall, immaculate, his voice clipped. He asked to speak to the senior nurses about intercepted correspondence. Clara's throat went dry. He unfolded a small file, reading names in alphabetical order. Her pulse thudded when he reached Jennings. "Routine," he said, glancing up. "A precaution. You were in contact with prisoners of war last year, correct?" "Yes, sir. Medical duty only." "You speak German?" "A little. Enough for medicine." He nodded. "You'll be assigned to the translation detail then. We're cataloging captured letters, love notes, propaganda, intercepted mail. You'll redact anything classified." The irony nearly made her laugh. They were handing her a room full of forbidden letters to censor, while she carried one in her own uniform. That night, as she worked under the dim bulbs of the censor's tent, she translated letters written by men on both sides of the war. They all sounded the same: fear, longing, lies told to keep hope alive. She began to recognize phrases. "My dearest. The nights are long. Pray for me." One envelope stopped her. The sender's name, Eric Weiss. Her breath caught. The addressee was his mother in Munich. The letter was dated February 1944. It began, "Mother, I am alive. We plant trees that will outlive us. I think of the woman who gave me water. She was English. They would call her my enemy. But I think she was the only friend I had left. Tell Father I am sorry I cannot be the son he wanted. I do not believe in this war anymore." The censor's orders were clear. Any letter expressing disillusionment was to be destroyed. Her hands trembled. She folded it carefully and slid it under her blouse. The next morning, she replaced the envelope with a blank sheet stamped unreadable. She slept with the letter under her pillow that night. The edges cut into her skin like truth. By early 1945, the world was collapsing. The Allies advanced into Germany. Refugees flooded the roads. The hospitals followed the army east. Clara crossed the border with a medical convoy, surrounded by the wreckage of a dying empire. She asked every prisoner they treated if they knew a man named Eric Weiss. Most shook their heads. A few said the name sounded familiar. A pilot, perhaps, captured early in the war. None could tell her more. One old German medic told her quietly, "There was such a man. They said he escaped. Some say he joined the Americans as an interpreter. Others say he vanished near the river." "Which river?" she asked. The man shrugged. "Too many rivers in Germany." When Berlin finally fell, Clara found herself stationed in a Red Cross camp outside the city. The landscape looked like the end of the world. Streets were skeletal. People moved like shadows. She walked every evening among the ruins, listening for a voice she could never have heard. The silver chain he had given her years ago still hung around her neck. Once, she caught sight of her reflection in a shattered shop window. Pale face, tired eyes, hair streaked with ash, and almost didn't recognize herself. A courier approached her one morning with a parcel. "For Nurse Jennings," he said. "Came through army channels. No sender." Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a small wooden box and a folded note. The handwriting was jagged but unmistakable. "Clara, if this reaches you, it means I found my way west. I'm no longer a soldier. The sky looks different when you stop trying to own it. I cannot stay here. They will hunt men like me. I will go where no flag flies, perhaps the sea, perhaps the mountains. I do not expect you to wait, but know this. Your kindness was the only true thing in this war." Underneath the note was the same silver chain, polished, whole, and a pressed violet wrapped in cloth. She pressed it to her lips and felt the sting of tears she hadn't allowed herself in years. The war, at last, had ended. But for Clara Jennings, peace was only another kind of silence. When the convoy returned to London in late 1945, the city looked both familiar and foreign. The hospital had been rebuilt with white paint over the old cracks. People smiled again, but their eyes were older. In her small rented room, Clara unpacked the wooden box, the chain, the letters. She arranged them on her table like relics of a faith she didn't know she still kept. On the back of the last letter, she wrote 3 words in pencil. "He kept living." Then she folded it into her journal, shut the window against the wind, and let herself finally rest. Winter fell hard over Europe in 1946, the first winter of peace that did not feel peaceful at all. In London, the hospitals emptied, rationing lingered, and people tried to stitch their lives back together with laughter that never quite reached their eyes. Clara Jennings went back to work at St. Bartholomew's, tending to veterans who screamed in their sleep. She learned to smile through exhaustion, to hold a hand when no medicine could help. She wore the same silver chain beneath her uniform every day. She never spoke of it. One afternoon, while restocking bandages, a colleague handed her an envelope. "From the Red Cross," she said. "Came through the German tracing service. You worked with POWs, didn't you?" Clara's heart stumbled. The envelope was thin, official, bearing a return mark from Munich. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. To Nurse Clara Jennings, the International Committee of the Red Cross regrets to inform you that the individual known as Erich Weiss was listed among missing personnel presumed deceased, January 1945, near Dresden. No remains recovered. She folded the paper slowly, carefully, as if the right precision could change the meaning of the words. Presumed was not the same as confirmed. She told herself that over and over. That night, she walked along the Thames. Fog rolled across the water like breath. She dropped a small violet, the one he had sent, into the current. It spun once, then vanished. "You're not gone," she whispered. "You're just somewhere I can't follow yet." Months passed. London healed in fragments. The cinema reopened. The ration lines shortened. Soldiers came home and married quickly, afraid peace might not last. Clara watched from the edges, smiling when expected, declining invitations she couldn't explain. Her supervisor, Matron Hollis, called her into the office one morning. "You've been recommended for overseas service," she said. "There's a position in the new War Graves Commission. We need nurses fluent in German." Clara hesitated. "Germany?" "Yes. You'd be stationed near Nuremberg, helping identify the missing. It's difficult work, but meaningful." She thought of the letter from Munich, of the word presumed. "I'll go," she said. Germany in 1947 was a landscape of ghosts. The forests had grown wild around the craters. Towns were husks, windows staring like open eyes. Clara traveled with a small team, doctors, translators, clerks, cataloging the dead. Their task was to make names where there were none, to bring closure to people who still set extra places at the table. She worked in a camp outside Dresden, cataloging personal effects, dog tags, watches, rings. Each object told a story, and she recorded them in careful, looping script. One day, a young German volunteer brought her a box of items recovered near a collapsed bridge across the Elbe River. Inside were several rusted tags, coins, and a small leather notebook sealed with string. She untied it, gently. The handwriting inside was German, tight, slanted, familiar. Her pulse quickened. On the first page, written in shaky ink: "To whoever finds this, I am Erich Weiss, former pilot, born Munich, 1918. If you survive this war, tell Clara Jennings that I kept my word. I defected in 1944 and worked with the Allies near the Elbe. When the bridge fell, I stayed to help the wounded cross. If this is where my story ends, tell her it was not in vain." The ink faded into smears near the bottom, as if drowned by rain or blood. Clara stared until the letters blurred. The room swayed around her. Her knees nearly buckled. A doctor passing by noticed her face. "Are you all right, nurse?" She swallowed. "Yes," she lied softly. "It's just a name I thought I'd never see again." That evening, she sat alone by the riverbank. The Elbe moved slow, wide, silent. She opened the notebook again, reading by the flicker of her lantern. Between the final pages, she found something folded. A scrap of British field map with a penciled circle near the edge. Beneath it, one sentence in English: "Home is anywhere you are remembered." She traced the words with her fingertip until the lantern burned out. Over the following weeks, she arranged for the notebook and Erich's tag to be sent to the War Graves Commission archive in London. Before she sealed the envelope, she added her own small note inside. He was not just a soldier. He was proof that kindness survives the worst of us. Then she tied the string tight and handed it to the courier. When he left, she felt a stillness inside her that she hadn't known in years. Not relief, not sorrow. Something quieter, like the settling of dust after a long storm. Her assignment ended in the spring of 1948. She returned to London, now a city of bright shop windows and rationless joy. People danced in the streets again. She felt older than them all. At home, she placed the last of her letters, his and hers, into a small wooden box. She locked it, then tucked the key inside the silver chain. From that night on, she wore the chain not around her neck, but wrapped twice around her wrist, as though holding something captive. Sometimes, she would glance at the box on the shelf and whisper, "You found your way back after all." Years later, when she spoke to young nurses about those days, she never mentioned Eric by name. She would only say, "There are some patients you never stop caring for. You just change how you do it." They would laugh, not understanding. But when she touched the chain around her wrist, the laughter faded. Something in her eyes made them quiet. One summer afternoon, a historian from the BBC came to interview her for a radio program on Allied compassion. They wanted stories of mercy during the war, times when enemies had chosen humanity over hate. He asked if she had ever treated a German prisoner. Clara smiled faintly. "Once," she said. "He asked me for water. I gave it. And I never stopped." The interviewer blinked, waiting for more, but she only said, "Sometimes mercy costs more than hate ever could." That night, after the broadcast aired, a listener from Munich wrote to the station. He said he had been a boy during the war, that his brother's name was Eric Weiss, a pilot who never came home. He thanked the nurse who had saved him once, long ago. The station forwarded the letter to Clara. She read it quietly, folded it into her box, and whispered, "He did make it home then." In words. The candle on her desk burned until dawn, the wax dripping in a pattern that looked to her tired eyes like the curve of a silver chain. London, 1952. 7 years since the war had ended, yet its echoes still haunted the city in quiet, invisible ways. Clara Jennings lived in a small flat above a bakery on Chambers Street, the kind of place where the scent of bread and sugar hid the ghosts in the walls. She worked 3 days a week at a children's hospital and spent her evenings cataloging medical records for the Royal College of Nursing. Her colleagues knew her as gentle, precise, perhaps a bit distant. No one asked about the silver bracelet she wore, 2 loops of chain, polished smooth from years of touch, or about the wooden box that always stayed locked in her desk drawer. She spoke little about the war. When new nurses asked if it had been as terrible as people said, she only answered, "Worse, but it taught us what mercy costs." Every spring, the post brought letters from people she'd once helped. A mother thanking her, a soldier with wedding news, an old matron inviting her to visit. One envelope, however, arrived without a return address. The handwriting was unfamiliar, sharp and deliberate. She almost threw it away until she saw the postmark, Munich. Her breath caught. She sat down before opening it. Inside was a single page written in English. "Dear Miss Jennings, I found your name in an archive while researching Allied nursing work. My uncle was Eric Weiss, a Luftwaffe pilot captured in 1942. We were told he died near Dresden, but a letter in his effects mentions a British nurse named Clara who saved his life. Our family never knew what that meant. If this reaches you, please know that his name was cleared after the war. His file was reopened. Records show he defected in 1944 and aided Allied forces as an interpreter. We were told he vanished during the bridge collapse at the Elbe. If you remember him, thank you for seeing him as more than an enemy. With gratitude, Johannes Weiss." Clara read the letter twice. Her fingers trembled only once when she reached the words, "His name was cleared." For years she had wondered whether history would call him a traitor or a ghost. Now, at last, he had been named what he truly was, a man who chose decency over obedience. She folded the letter and placed it in the box with the others. For the first time in nearly a decade, she unlocked the clasp and reread everything. Every smudged line, every ink blot, every word written by a hand that might never have grown old. She wept, quietly and without shame. That night, she dreamed of the ward in Whitechapel, the smell of antiseptic and candle wax. She saw him lying on the cot again, eyes open, mouth forming the word Danke. But this time, in the dream, she wasn't the nurse. She was the one lying there, and he was the one standing over her. He reached out, touched her wrist, and said, "You kept me alive longer than anyone knew." When she woke, the room was full of early light. She felt strangely rested, as if she had slept a lifetime. Weeks later, she traveled to Munich, officially to attend a nursing conference, but truly to find the man who had written. The train passed fields bright with wildflowers and villages rebuilt from rubble. She hadn't crossed the channel since the end of the war. The sound of German voices still made her heart twist, though not from fear. At the station, Johannes Weiss met her, a tall man in his 30s with kind eyes and a cautious smile. "You look nothing like him," she said, and then, embarrassed, added, "That's a compliment." He laughed softly. "I suppose I don't, but I do remember him. I was a child when he left. My mother said he wrote to her about an English nurse who gave him water when no one else would." Clara nodded. He didn't lie. Johannes led her through the city, showing her photographs his family had kept. Eric as a boy, Eric in uniform, Eric smiling beside an airplane wing. She touched the edges of the images as though the paper might dissolve under her fingers. They visited his grave at a small cemetery outside the city, though there was no body. Only a marker placed above the words, "Eric Weiss, 1918 to 1945, believed lost at the Elbe." Someone had left a single violet there. Clara knelt, tracing the carved name with one gloved hand. "He never stopped trying to do what was right," she murmured. Johannes placed a hand on her shoulder. Then he found the right person to remember him. That evening, she returned to her hotel and took the silver chain from her wrist. She looped it once, then twice around the handle of her suitcase. "Stay here," she whispered. When she boarded the train back to London the next morning, she left it behind. In the years that followed, she found herself lighter, freer. She spoke more, laughed more. She began teaching nursing ethics at the hospital, telling her students that the hardest part of medicine was not healing the body, but refusing to let the heart harden. Once, during a lecture, she said, "Compassion is not a victory, it's a risk. But sometimes it's the only kind of courage left." Her students never knew that she spoke from the memory of a German pilot and a handful of letters. When she retired in 1968, the hospital staff presented her with a book of signatures and a silver bracelet. "We noticed you don't wear one anymore," the matron said with a smile. Clara touched it, smiling back. "Then I suppose it's time to start again." She wore it every day, though her heart still beat to the rhythm of another chain, another time. At night, she would sometimes take out the wooden box and read the last letter, the one written in 2 languages, English and German, both fading together. "If I never write again, remember this. The foolish kindness of one enemy saved a man who did not deserve it." She closed her eyes and whispered into the quiet room, "Then I suppose we were both foolish, weren't we?" The candle flickered once, as if in answer. Outside, London's streets glimmered with rain again. It had been 25 years since she first broke the rules and offered water to a stranger. The world had changed, but kindness had not. By the early 1980s, time had transformed Clara Jennings into a legend in the hospital corridors. New nurses pronounced her name in the past tense, though she was still alive, walking slowly through the same hallways where she once ran through fire alarms and blackouts. They called her the nurse who never lost courage. She smiled, a little embarrassed, but never corrected them. Her hair had turned snow white. Her eyes, though faded, still held the color of that protective light, the one she once described to a dying man as the last color before peace. She lived alone in a small brick house on the Sussex coast, surrounded by wind, salt, and the cries of seagulls. From her window, she could see the sea, gray, infinite, beautiful in its cruelty. Every morning, she made tea, opened the curtains, and spoke quietly to the air, as if continuing a conversation that had never really ended. In her living room, there was a glass cabinet filled with books, letters, and a photograph of her younger self beside a group of nurses in front of St. Bartholomew's Hospital. Next to it rested the wooden box, the one that had accompanied her for decades, across continents and through grief. She hadn't opened it for years. Not because she forgot, but because she had memorized every word it contained. Sometimes visiting students or journalists came for interviews, expecting stories of bravery, medals, and victories. Clara always redirected them. "The war wasn't made of heroes," she said. "It was made of people trying not to become monsters." A nervous student asked, "Have you ever fallen in love, Miss Jennings?" She smiled, that calm, perceptive smile that had survived nations. "Once," she said. "Was he a soldier?" "Yes, but that's not what made him brave." "What did?" "He learned to stop fighting." After that, silence filled the room. That night, the coastal wind howled louder than usual. She sat at her desk, candlelight flickering with each gust. Johannes Weiss's letter, Eric's nephew, lay beside her, now yellowed with age. She picked up her pen and began the last diary entry, the first in nearly a decade. "For whoever reads this after I'm gone, I met a man who reminded me that mercy is not weakness. It is the hardest thing we ask of the human heart. I saved his life once, and he saved mine forever. If heaven exists, I hope he speaks all languages at once." She signed only with her initials, CJ, and placed the page inside the wooden box. Then, for the first time in 40 years, she unlocked it. The air smelled faintly of lavender and ink. Inside lay the old silver chain, coiled like a sleeping memory. She touched it with trembling fingers, feeling warmth where cold metal should have been. 2 weeks later, on a quiet Sunday morning, Clara Jennings passed away in her sleep. The nurse who found her said she seemed at peace, almost smiling, with one hand resting on the chain and the other on the diary. The candle beside her had burned to the end, leaving a small wax pool in the shape of a wing. Her belongings were left to the hospital archive. The wooden box drew the most attention. When archivists opened it, they found the letters, carefully organized and tied with ribbon, with the diary page on top. A young intern who spoke German read the first lines aloud, his voice breaking. "She wrote to someone named Eric," he said. "She says he taught her mercy." The curator decided the story deserved to be told. Months later, the Imperial War Museum created a small exhibition called Letters Without Borders. At the center, under glass, were two objects: the silver chain, now dull but intact, and a single letter that Clara had hidden beneath a floorboard. "Clara, we are being transferred east. If I never write again, remember this. The foolish kindness of an enemy saved a man who didn't deserve it." Visitors paused, reading in silence. Some held hands. Others wept quietly. A veteran, leaning on his cane, whispered, "This is the truest thing I've ever heard." The exhibition became permanent. Visiting students left origami cranes in the display. Trainee nurses pinned small violets on their uniforms every May 8th, Victory in Europe Day, honoring the nurse who believed in impossible kindness. One winter, the museum received a letter from an elderly man in Bavaria. He wrote in hesitant English, "I was a child when she gave water to my brother. She gave the world something better than victory. She gave memory." The museum preserved the letter and placed a copy next to the exhibit. Years later, when the museum closed for renovation, a night guard swore he saw, just once, a faint figure near the display. A woman in a white nurse uniform, hair neatly tied back, hand resting on the letter. She seemed calm, as if listening. And though he couldn't be sure, he thought he heard a soft, tender whisper in German. Heim. Home. And so, the war ended once more. Not with surrender, flags, or speeches, but with the quiet victory of a promise kept between two souls who refused to let the world dictate whom they were allowed to love. End of story. How a nurse's forbidden letters made a German pilot desert and vanish forever.